Welcome back. I'm Alfred Weber. We're with the Reverend Kevin Annett, who is acting secretary of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Alfred.
Well, I understand that there's been an announcement from the tribunal with regard to a recent alleged federal court action. Could you update us on that?
Well, as people know from our last broadcast, on July 4th, Jason Bowman, who was a co-plaintiff in a suit with me, held a press conference in Toronto in which he announced the launching of a class action suit against the Crown of England, the Pope, the government and churches of Canada, and big pharmaceutical companies. But in the 2 weeks since then, Mr. Bowman never filed the papers. And it perplexed me and many of the other parties to this lawsuit why he wasn't actually filing papers. He never gave an explanation. He never disclosed to me as the co-plaintiff why he wasn't doing that. So in consultation with the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State and the Council of Elders of that group, it was decided that it was important to maintain our credibility and act in an effective way legally because of the momentous nature of this lawsuit we're bringing. It's historic, it's the first of its kind, and quite frankly, it can't be botched. It can't be done in a way that compromises the case or the people in it. So we decided yesterday to disaffiliate from Mr. Bowman's efforts. Whether or not he's actually filed the suit yet is problematic. We have had no information that, in fact, he has gone ahead. But for our own credibility and for the importance of this case and the hopes of many thousands of victims of church and state terror all over the world, we had to step back. Not only because of Mr. Bowman's actions, and this is important, but also consulting various legal experts around the world who work with our tribunal. It was decided that a court under Crown jurisdiction in Canada, like the Federal Court of Canada, which this lawsuit was supposed to be filed in, that court did not have competent jurisdiction to hear an issue involving genocidal actions by the Crown itself. In other words, as we've experienced in Canadian courts before, around the Indian residential school crimes, courts under Crown authority have ruled that the issue of genocide by the Crown and the Vatican as ultra vires are outside their jurisdiction. They're not willing or able to rule on it. We were afraid the same thing was going to happen in the federal court. So while originally our hope was that going through federal court here was a way to exhaust all the domestic legal remedies, which is necessary before taking it international legal action, we realized that on the basis of Mr. Bowman's non-filing of the papers and his questionable behavior, and this issue that the competency of the jurisdiction itself is in question, we felt we had to not just step back from this case, but take it in a new direction. And so in many ways, we're viewing the situation now as a springboard to effective action. And that would mean two things: taking our case and the evidence to other courts in other countries that are not under Crown and canon law jurisdiction, and also to establish de jure common law courts within Canada of 12 people sworn in to hear the evidence and bring about a verdict and a sentencing. So we think that that is a better way to go, and this is what we're looking forward to working on over the next while.
So what do you think your timetable is to put all of this into effect?
We're looking at doing this immediately. In the course of the last several weeks after the federal court case was announced, I alone received over 30 communications from people who are victims, for example, of drug testing by pharmaceutical companies in Indian residential schools, mothers whose children have been abducted by the child care system, so-called child care system. We're looking at child trafficking and other, crimes against humanity. And we feel it's necessary to keep the momentum going. So what we're looking at as a timetable is in the fall, convening, so by September, convening common law courts and taking the evidence into various other national courts. I won't mention the countries at this point, but we have a number of people in Europe and lawyers in Europe who have already started working with us in this effort.
So what do you feel was the positive that you gained from the 2 weeks or so in this experience? with an alleged suit that was filed that then wasn't filed, and a lot of confusion. A lot of people were very confused.
Yes, that confusion was really unfortunate. It's important to understand that when I agreed to be co-plaintiff with Jason Bowman, I assumed there would be consultation going on. I assumed that he would be keeping me posted, talking to me about a strategy. None of that happened. I was left completely out in the cold. So I think it's important for people to realize that none of this process was in the hands of myself or the ITCCS. We were simply relying on Jason Bowman to do the competent and the right thing in this regard. The fact that he did hold the press conference, it did draw a lot of attention to the whole issue, that for the first time the Crown, the Vatican, big corporations were being named as not only accomplices in crimes against humanity, but also as being involved in a criminal conspiracy of covering up that crime. For example, the policy of the Vatican, which orders clergy all over the world to conceal child rape when it occurs in their parishes. All of that was being named for the first time publicly, and people were very enthusiastic. We were getting support that we've never received before, simply because we were taking that next step. And there were more hits on our sites than we've ever had, and I think that shows you the level of commitment and you know, awareness around this issue, that we have to do more than talk. We've got to also do more than document. We've got to take this into courts with the power to sentence and to eventually not just charge these institutions, but look at a way to disestablish them legally so that they cannot continue to do these crimes.
What are your personal next steps now?
My steps over the next couple of months will involve a lot of travel, going throughout Canada, the United States. In New York, we have a number of meetings with lawyers there. And then over to Europe, I'll be going to Brussels, England, Ireland, a number of countries, and of course including Italy, where we're working with a number of survivors groups there that have been trying to sue the Pope personally for many of these crimes. I'll be doing a lot of traveling and organizing, trying to establish these common law courts. And within Canada, our network is really being mobilized to put forward to people that project of now the next step is convening these common law courts. We're bringing together the expertise. We're going to be having training workshops for people as to how exactly to set up these common law courts. And for people to realize that this is a very important step, not just in terms of a crime being named, but when people declare themselves sovereign through establishing their own courts, the next step is to declare political sovereignty and spiritual sovereignty. And that's why, for example, within Canada, the project of declaring the Republic of Kanata, severing ties with the monarchy, and disestablishing these church corporations within Canadian territory, that's the next logical step to this. So this has tremendous repercussions that are ongoing, and we're just beginning the process.
There seems to have been a very positive response that I could gauge to the establishment of the Republic of Kanata. I know that there's a deep swell for an independent Canada and getting out from under the British monarchy. Could you talk more about that?
Well, just 3 years ago, in a national opinion poll, 58% of Canadians wanted to sever ties, constitutional ties with the monarchy and be a republic. So we have the majority of Canadians already with us. But we're not just talking about a change of hats, you know, the Governor General becoming the President and everything remaining the same. We want a different kind of society where, for example, these historic crimes can be addressed and there can be real reparations and, like I mentioned, reestablishment of these institutions on a democratic basis. For example, priests should not be allowed to operate under their own system of law, which allows them to rape and then in 99% of cases get away with it. Clergy should be licensed as public servants and then have their license taken away if they harm a child. The wealth of these church corporations and the big pharma companies and the corporations that are raping our environment, these have all got to be brought under public control. Historically, every Native person in Canada was promised, under the original BNA Act and the previous treaties with the European powers, every Native person was promised 160 acres of land. Well, most Native people in Canada are homeless. Where is that promised land? We have to reestablish the founding vision of the European settlers and the Native nations, the Tuora Wampum, where people were living side by side, not dominating each other, but sharing the land equally. And that's, to me, what a Republic of Kanata looks like. It isn't a change of flag, it's a change of spirit, it's a change of political economy, so that justice isn't just a word. We're actually establishing that from the ground up, and that's part of the vision that we're putting forward.
What are some of the other countries besides Canada where you found that the courts, you think, the common law courts, you think would be more favorable toward these claims?
We've begun to do this research. We found that countries like Iceland, Zimbabwe, have no ties whatsoever to any tradition of obviously the English crown or canon law. They don't actually have papal nuncios in their country or Vatican ambassadors. They don't have diplomatic relations with the so-called Vatican state. We know that in Spain they claim universal jurisdiction over human rights cases. And these are all possibilities. I think, in fact, any country could declare sovereignty from the, for example, canon law and the other legal systems that have allowed these crimes to continue over centuries, crimes of genocide. So, we're going to any country that's open to working with us. It was interesting, President Vladimir Putin in Russia a few years ago made a comment that he was considering recognizing the declaration of sovereignty made by the Lakota Nation in the United States by Russell Means and other Lakota elders. I think, the old adage, the enemy of our enemy is our friend, can certainly work in this case. There's a lot of people around the world who are not just upset about the history of the Vatican and these crimes of genocide, but they want to do something about it permanently now to disestablish this legacy of crimes against humanity.
Good. Specifically, you have now been establishing a great deal of evidence. What do you think your first steps will be in terms of legal steps from here on?
Well, we have to establish the proper jurisdiction, first of all, the competent jurisdiction for this case to be heard. And once the court is established, the judges are in place, and we set up the right protocol for doing this. We have enough evidence now. We have the concept Jason put forward actually in that establishing citizen prosecutors who have from their own experience the knowledge of these crimes. Have those citizen prosecutors argue their case in these common law courts, bring the evidence forward, and then have these judges study the material, issue arrest warrants so that these parties can be brought into court. The very fact of doing that poses a real political question of who has authority within Canada. And one of the ways we intend to do that within Canada, and this applies to other countries, but especially within Canada, is we have authorization now from 3 Indigenous nations and their elders to operate on their territory to establish these common law courts. So, for example, on the Grand River Six Nations Mohawk territory around Brantford, where we first began to do digs at the oldest residential school in Canada, the Mohawk Institute there, set up by the Church of England. The Mohawk elders there have given us permission to establish this de jure court on their land. And we know from past experience the police, the RCMP, will not come on that land once the elders are establishing jurisdiction. And we were digging on the grounds of the residential school, digging up remains of children and clothing from the school that would have indicted the police and will indict the police and the Crown, and yet they didn't intervene to stop us. So it shows you the power of standing on native traditions and land, and under their umbrella of authority. So that's in the Six Nations territory, among the Anishinaabe or Ojibwe people of central Canada, whose nation I was adopted into 7 years ago, and among the Squamish Nation on the west coast. We have authority in those 3 regions to begin operating under tribal law, traditional law. Now this would be against the interest and authority of the government Native chiefs, the Assembly of First Nations, and those who are civil servants of the federal government and the Crown. So in effect, we are recognizing that the real authority on Native land lies with the traditional elders and land law jurisdiction.
Thank you. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, either to join in these actions or to support these efforts, what is the best way to find out more information and to get in contact with you?
Well, the easiest way is to look at our website of the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State. It's ITCCS.org. ITCCS.org. And all of our evidence so far is posted up online of the genocide in Canada, the deaths of over 50,000 children in Catholic and Protestant boarding schools. All of that is documented online at hiddennolonger.com. And if people would like to contact me, it's hiddenfromhistory1@gmail.com. And like I say, this week I'm beginning the organizing tour for this, establishing these common law courts. Basically, this experience with the Bowman action is, I think, a lesson in what not to do, but it's also a springboard forward. And I'm very encouraged and enthusiastic, Alfred, about the possibilities in the future. This is taking it to a whole new level. And this is something that the powers that be cannot ignore. They ignore at their own peril, because we are now turning the tables on them. We're not going to them anymore for justice, when that'll never happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We've been with the Reverend Kevin Annett, who is the acting secretary of the International Tribunal for Crimes into Church and State. Thank you.
Thank you.